Digits across the south for a time, but actually it'll probably turn colder as that rain pulls away, because that rain's got some mild air mixed in with it, and as that pulls away, look at the map turning blue. It is going to get colder through the weekend and into next week with the return of frost and ice.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you.
GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Steyn. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely
Right.
stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship,
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
and no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Hello, very good evening to you. Welcome to Thursday's edition of The Mark Steyn Show. With me, Bev Turner, I send all my best wishes to Mark. I'm keeping your seat warm. We hope you'll be back soon. Now, we've got a stellar lineup of stories this evening and guests for you tonight. You don't want to miss it. As rumours emerge suggesting that senior members of the royal family are sceptical about the Prince of Woke's attendance at the King's coronation, we'll be asking Dr. David Starkey if Prince Harry has become what he claims to hate, a tabloid journalist. And in a desperate bid to get the middle-agers back to work, the government are considering plans to scrap income tax for the over-50s. Is this what Britain needs? It's certainly an interesting proposal. Have we become an economically inactive nation? Money expert Helen Dewdney is here to give her take on this later. And could we be heading towards a face-off at the Supreme Court between the Scottish and UK governments? Well, the new Policy Exchange report has just made the legal case for the UK government to pursue legal action over the controversial gender recognition bill. We'll get into that with a former member of the Scottish Parliament. Plus, the government have been caught in controversy after backtracking on anti-spiking legislation. That's putting something in somebody's drink without them knowing about it. They've claimed that the crime is covered by other laws, but law enforcement themselves said that it would help to tackle the under-policed problem. Former Chief Superintendent at the Met Police, Pam Sardu, is here in the studio this evening. And later in the show, you'll get the chance to test the Turner. They didn't warn me about that bit, so don't forget to send in your views to gbviews@gbnews.uk. I'm scared. That's all coming up, but first the headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Bev, thank you and good evening to you. Well, on his first visit to Scotland as Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak is holding talks with the First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon. The two leaders expected to touch on a range of issues, including the NHS and the cost of living crisis. He's also seeking to discuss Miss Sturgeon's push for Scottish independence. They're due to make a joint announcement on their plans for government funding tomorrow. Let me bring you some breaking news that we've just received in the last few minutes. Over 70,000 staff at 150 universities across the UK will strike for 18 days from between February and March in disputes over pay, conditions and pensions. That's the announcement from the University and College Union. More detail on that as we get it. Now, a special counsel will investigate President Joe Biden's handling of classified documents. The move comes after revelations about documents in at least 2 locations. The files include US intelligence memos from his home in Delaware and a Washington office during his time as Vice President under Barack Obama. Here, travel disruption continues for passengers in and around London today, with strikes on the newly opened Elizabeth line. Members from the Transport Salaried Staffs Association and their sister union Prospect have walked off the job over pay and pensions. The two unions rejected a 4.4% increase this year. Transport for London has warned of short-notice cancellations and changes to the schedule. Well, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, says the government needs to up its negotiating skills.
I don't want to see this industrial action. I want to lead a government that resolves these issues. Under the last Labour government, you didn't have a national strike for nurses. You had fair pay for nurses, and we think that you should be in the room negotiating, sorting out these problems.
The singer Lee Ryan has been found guilty of racially aggravated assault. The incident happened on a British Airways flight last July. Ealing Magistrates Court in West London heard the former member of the band Blue also asked a female flight attendant to kiss him. The former pop star has apologised for his behaviour. More women will be able to get checked for breast cancer after the government announced £10 million in funding towards NHS screening units. The initiative will make screening more accessible for thousands of women, with 29 new units being set up. The investment will also see upgrades to ultrasound and X-ray units to better detect cancer using new and improved software. Those are the latest news stories. You are up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. You're with GB News. Let's get back to Beverly Turner.
Good evening, it's Bev Turner here sitting in for Mark Steyn tonight. Thank you for joining me. Now, I don't know about you, but I feel that I know more about Harry Windsor at the end of this week than I do about my own children. And frankly, rather a lot of things I wouldn't ever want to know about my own children. It's actually hard to believe that the Californicated, psycho-babbling navel-gazer was once a bloke tough enough to fly bloomin' helicopters around the desert, shooting his big boy rockets off at baddies hiding in the bushes. If only he'd remained the rebellious prince that we loved, with a twinkle in his eye and a penchant for older women in pub car parks, as we now know. Stop giggling, David Starkey. Today, for the first time, both the king and heir and their spouses were out and about for the first time since the book's release, smiling nicely, waving politely and probably muttering under their breath about amending the coronation guest list. It's not into the breach on horseback for this Harry, it's into the media circuit. Because that's it, isn't it? Harry has become that which he purported for so long to have hated, a muck-raking scribbler with one eye and a punchy pull quote. Leaving behind a majestic institution and a life of stoic commitment to service and duty, the future in front of him is one of shallow likes, clicks publishing deals, views, and engagement with fans alongside his lived experience. Considering that he's frothing with hatred for journalists, and given his mother's death, that is at least understandable. He's done journalism no end of favours this week with the amount of content that he's generated. He is the editor's gift that keeps on giving. We here at GB Towers thought there was something tragic, something classically prophetic even about this paradoxical turn of events. Did Harry's story have the dignity and weight of Sophocles' two brothers fighting over the throne of Thebes? Perhaps Octavia's divorce from Nero? A quote sprung to mind. "You have become the very thing you sought to destroy." What was that? Shakespeare? Iliad? No, a light bulb moment. Obi-Wan Kenobi to Anakin Skywalker, Darth Vader. All that fixation on pent-up maternal energy turning him into one of the villains that he swore he'd always fight against. And now it's reported that when it comes to the coronation, Harry and Meghan will be NFI, not flipping invited. The risk just isn't worth it for the firm. He's too good at the job of being a journalist with an eye for a good story. In fact, he's probably become the best paid journalist of all time. Parallels, of course, are drawn with Edward VIII, the last lovesick puppy to turn his back on the monarchy, who had to watch the late Queen's big day on the telly in Paris with his American actress, Mrs. Now it will be the same for Harry, except he'll most likely be in LA with Meghan and his echo chamber acolytes, telling him that none of this is his fault and perpetuating the victim mindset, which nobody seems willing to shake him out of. But then monetising his trauma is proving very profitable. As my next guest has said, Harry could learn a thing or two from those taking part in the Invictus Games. His, which he established brilliantly, although one might reasonably ask if he's now turned them into potential terrorist targets with his Taliban kill count boasts. Those veterans haven't embraced victim status, despite suffering life-changing injuries in the line of duty and never hoping to earn a fraction of what the Duke has been bringing in recently. They refuse to be branded perma victims and offer inspiration for the rest of us whenever we suffer loss and setbacks in our lives. Harry's message, on the other hand, is that when bad things happen, it is always someone else's fault. His inability to look in the mirror of his own fairy tale and take responsibility for his actions is surely his fatal flaw. Well, who better to set Harry straight and give us some insight into the rebellious prince and what it means for us in this country than the legendary historian, Mr. David Starkey.
Doctor, if we're being formal, otherwise known as David.
OK, David. Well, when you're on my show, you're Doctor. Here at Mark Steyn, you're just Starkey to me now. I'll have you on my show so much. Right.
Little pet.
David,
little pet.
Thank you, Doctor, for sitting there and listening to me banging on. What have you made of it all this week? As we come towards the end of the week, we've learnt so much about him, things we never wanted to know.
That's true. You were saying he was a journalist. I think I've got a new name for him.
Go on.
Deep Throat. He has become...
You might have to clarify that.
Well, it's a famous person who leaked, and he has become... this is not journalism. He is the insider who betrays. Once again, he's become the mirror image, the black to the white of his late grandmother. The Queen, with her permanent silence, the occasional meaningful word, you know, and how nice it is that the Scots haven't gone independent, the little purr. Suddenly now, you have a permanent stream of not very reliable insider gossip.
Yeah. So what will they all... We saw them today, David. We saw the royals out and about today. As I say, they were all waving nicely and probably muttering under their breath. Will they have made a decision already about what happens at the coronation, do you think, in terms of their
I think the king will be torn. The king is torn. He claims still. After all, Harry is his child. Harry was once a lovable boy.
Yeah.
He tried desperately hard, under terrible circumstances, to be a good father. We know about the emotional constipation, but then look at how he was greeted when he hadn't seen his mother for 6 months,
Yeah.
Effectively a handshake.
Yeah.
But what the king will be torn with is the desperate wish that he should be there, that the person who, remember, is the second adult in line to the throne. OK, there were 3 children ahead of him, but he should have been there as one of the king's 2 proud, strapping young sons who would help their father towards this enormous task ahead of him. Instead, they can't trust him. This is the most terrible thing that he's done. And you haven't mentioned this. It is the betrayal, the constant betrayal of trust and confidence.
That constitution is built on nothing but trust, isn't it?
Well, the whole way in which you can manage being a family, which at the same time is an institution, you have to have a border. There has to be a boundary. Otherwise, you do something that the Queen said she would never be. Harry has become, he's not become a journalist, he's become the cheapest of cheapest D-list celebs. The only thing about a D-list celeb that matters is you know every single disgusting detail of their private lives. He makes the Kardashians look dignified. I never thought I would be able to utter those words. You never thought you would hear them. No. But he really does. It's a constant... to discuss whether or not you and your brother are circumcised publicly. This is it's self-muckraking. He is putting the contents, not simply of his waste paper basket, but of his bathroom bin in the public eye. When I did the interview with Nigel on this, and we talked about what happens when you become a devotee. It's a behaviour, again, of a person who's undergone a kind of religious conversion. There's even a phrase for it in the Bible. It's speaking in tongues, this kind of uncontrolled flow. But it's an uncontrolled flow that destroys him. He would have wished it to destroy the institution, but instead it's turning back on him.
What about in America, David? Do you think the Americans... I believe that the tide is even turning over there now. They've always been very supportive of him.
Well, a group has. Remember, Harry corresponds to pretty much Democrat versus Republican, Democrats in favour. And here it is Remainers, at least young ones, loved Harry, and wicked leavers like me and probably you... I
was a Remainer, but now I'm a Leaver.
What am I talking about? Sorry, dear me, I'm getting as confused as Harry. In other words, it was Remainers who loved him, and Leavers who hated him. So in other words, it's exactly the same divide. And in America, remember, he became a kind of gospel boy. He became a front for woke. Did you not say the Prince of Woke at the beginning? But even I think the woke are tiring of him, because of course the great problem is he reveals just how destructive woke is. Woke is seen in Harry as something that's only about destroying. It's got no positive values. It's also, of course, that he's so inconsistent about it. On the one hand, lining up the David Olusogas, the Afua Hirsches and whatever, this wicked racist institution, this Empire Mark II in the film, in the Netflix series. And then, when he's actually questioned about it in detail, oh, no, they weren't racist at all. So he can't hold steady to one single position. His religious conversion is not yet complete. The only thing that is clear is there's a complete disintegration of a personality.
So you're used to looking backwards as a historian, but I want you to look forward now into your little crystal ball and predict what will become of him.
Historians shouldn't do that. That's the point.
Go on.
That's the point at which. That's the point. That's at which the point. I will do. But I'm just going to put in. That's the point at which you become. That's the point at which you become a charlatan.
Right.
I mean, I think what you said is right. His destiny is to become an increasingly diminished figure in California. This is a boy who began at Sandhurst, standing up straight, in uniform, looking great. He will finish up a shambolic, probably rather druggy figure somewhere in California.
Possibly doing tattoos and nipple piercing.
We did hear a little bit about his todger, as he called it, didn't we? Maybe there could be one. But you can see. But
conversations you never think you're going to have.
But can't you see how it could go?
Yes, I can.
I mean, I said with his mother, who in some ways, Harry has become his mother.
Yeah.
He's become his mother's worst side. I say the peculiarity about Diana, who was the daughter of an earl and countess, the flower of the English shires. She behaved as though she'd been born in Orange County.
Yeah.
She was a sort of natural Californian. And this has been fulfilled in Harry. And what I think is also interesting is the way the two boys have divided so absolutely, extraordinarily. So William has become not even his father, he's become a kind of masculine version of his grandmother. Whereas Harry has become the ultimate version of Diana. And the one thing he's not good at, unlike Diana, he's not yet learned to pose properly for photographs. But if you imagine, I mean, maybe this is the next stage, Meghan and Harry in front of the Taj Mahal doing something memorable for the front page of The Sun.
Well, I feel like for now we've got a little reprieve from Harry-ness, don't you? Until the next book and the next series.
And we don't want a little touch of Harry in the night. Thank you very much.
And on that bombshell, Dr. David Starkey, thank you so much for joining me. Right, coming up, the Treasury have been looking at incentivising over 50s back into the workplace by making them temporarily exempt, that's right, exempt from paying income tax. I'm going to be digging into that, what it might mean, what would it mean for you, with financial expert Helen Dewdney. Plus, remember, the controversial Gender Recognition Act that was passed in Scottish Parliament just a couple of weeks ago. Well, government sources have said that they plan to acknowledge it. We're going to be talking to former SNP councillor Austin Sheridan about that. Pop the kettle on, see you in a minute.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you.
GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Very good evening. Welcome back to Mark Steyn tonight with me. Bev Turner, I'm normally on this telly at 10 o'clock in the morning. I've been home, had a little nap, got changed, borrowed a dress out of Mark's wardrobe. I think it's quite nice, don't you? This is the People's Channel, so let's channel the people. We asked you if Harry does go to the coronation, should he be forced to sign an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement? Yes. He's leaked too much private information, says one Twitter user. If the Sussexes go, they have to go. Also, another one here. No, everybody should know by now to keep anything quiet that they would not want to be repeated. And Stuart has said this, I wouldn't let him come. The boy is prepared to cut his nose off to spite his face. He wants the fight and the argument, the story, the money goes nowhere without it. And this one, another one, says, put him on the back row at the coronation. So, well, none of you are very much in support of Harry. Like I say, I hope we've had enough of Harryness for a while. We don't have to talk about it for a little while, but I'm not going to hold my breath. Now, in a desperate attempt to get people back to work, the Tories have announced that they are thinking about making over 50s temporarily exempt from income tax for up to a year if they're returning to the labour force. Now, since the lockdowns, we know that many people have opted not to go back to work. Over 50s are at a point where they have a home, a pension plan, which is getting closer, and really haven't felt the need to jump back into the workforce. Even with the cost of living crisis, people still seem reluctant. But is this really just an incentive scheme to get people back to work, or is it a way to secure votes, which Rishi desperately needs from the over 50 demographic? Well, here to discuss this with me is financial expert and CEO of The Complaining Cow, Helen Dewdney. Helen, what's The Complaining Cow?
Me.
Well, one complaining cow to another, then me. No, genuinely, what does it do?
I run a website, so it provides consumer advice, really, so saving money and your consumer rights for people. So
excellent.
Help them get their redress, which they're entitled.
That is right up my street, Helen. I'm so glad I've met you. Right, what do you make of this? Explain to us in a little bit more detail what it is that they're intending or suggesting might be an option.
Yeah, I think they're suggesting it, as you say, about the over 50s returning to incentivise them. They think, to return to work. And also they're talking about people with disabilities actually being able to keep some of their benefits, or all of their benefits and their wages if they return to work up to a year for both the over 50s and the disability scheme.
So what do you think of it? I'm sort of thinking of it from a social point of view. There could be all sorts of repercussions and resentments in the office.
I think there will be. There'll be arguments between the young and the older, thinking you've got a house, I haven't, and how do I get onto that ladder? But then also there will be with the over 50s who've been in work all that time and say, well, why am I not getting any benefit? So there are those kinds of issues. And also, what will be the administrative costs for all this? Have they thought that out?
Do you know what I do think, though, where I can see this being beneficial, and of course, something that might one day benefit me. I'm a very long way from being 50 yet, Helen. This year. But one of the things that I did think it could benefit would be those women of my sort of age, my demographic. I've got loads of mates like this who gave up paid work to work at home and raise the children. The children that get older, they go to university, they're sort of A-levels age. And the mums go, I'd quite like to go back to work, and anything that will incentivise them, because often you lack confidence as well at that age to go back into the workplace. From that point of view, it's got to be a good idea.
Well, perhaps there are elements there, but there are lots and lots of reasons why people don't go back to work. We've seen a huge rise throughout COVID of people being off with sick. And so actually that's probably the biggest element. So it's not just about people needing to be financially incentivised. Actually, people want to be happy at work. We've got a huge mental health crisis in this country. So perhaps some money would be better spent actually supporting people with mental health issues, getting them happier and actually wanting to go back to work. And if they're happier at work, then everyone will be more productive.
So in your mind, then, it's just not going to be a good use of resources. But then also, similarly, if you are going back into the workplace and you haven't been working for many years, the chances of you walking into like a six-figure salary job are pretty remote, there may not be that many people that would even qualify because the tax threshold perhaps that you would have to earn, because a lot of people might go back part-time, maybe if you've not worked for years, maybe it just is not, it just doesn't, it's not going to stack up anyway. It's not going to be many people be eligible for it.
No, and I think that's where some of the complications will arise, because at what point will you be allowed to do it for? How long will you be allowed to have this allowance for? Will you have to pay it back if you then only do a year and then go off work? Or what about the people who, think that's a really good idea, I'm going to stop work for 6 months and then I'll return and then I'll get that incentivised. There will be ways of gaming the system that they'll have to look at.
It's a very good headline grabber, though, isn't it?
Absolutely.
We're talking about it. And I think also, from a politics point of view, as we know, as I said there in the introduction, a lot of Conservative voters are of a more, a sort of more classical vintage, shall we say? Should we put it like that? The elderly population. And they will probably go, that's a lovely thing for me, and I'm going to vote for you for that reason.
I don't know, I think the government are so unpopular at the moment that it might just take a little bit more than a scheme that seems to be thought of written on the back of a postage stamp.
Yeah.
So I think we need to see a lot more detail. I think it's just being thrown out there as headlines to see and test the water, probably.
As a financial expert, what are you hearing from people maybe that use your website? What are you seeing at the moment in terms of what people are struggling with and what they can do about it?
It's the cost of living crisis. People aren't thinking about returning to work and getting the tax benefits. It's people who are in work and haven't got enough money to pay the bills. They haven't got enough money to pay their energy bills. Seeing people, the increase we heard today, the increase of people who've been forced onto payment meters and then having to pay more for their energy.
Yeah.
So it's really much about people who are just struggling to survive. This is too much for them to think about, well, I'm already in work. I need some help with my bills. That's what people want help with.
Because we've already got the highest tax burden in 70 years, and yet we've got public services striking because they are feeling underfunded. Whether they are underfunded or not is possibly up for debate, but they're certainly feeling that they're not being paid enough. And so when you look at the state of the economy in your job and you look at what's happening now, do you think what would be the solution? That's a big political question. I know it's a bit mean to put that on you. But where do you think those resources, which demographic, which age group, this is a story about age fundamentally, which age group needs the help? Because as you say, there are a load of people who just haven't gone back to work and are disincentivised, particularly the under 24s.
Yeah, I don't think it's about age. I really don't think it's about age. I think it's right across the board. I'm seeing people from all sorts of walks of life, who are struggling. When we're seeing nurses and teachers and firefighters using food banks, that's just, what's wrong with our country? We're a first world country. Something's very, very wrong in all of that.
Yeah.
Really.
And mortgages, interest rates, people are going to be defaulting on their mortgages, significant numbers we were hearing about in the press today. That's going to start kicking in probably the next couple of months, I would have thought.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to just see people more and struggling more and more, whether they're in work or not. That's where they just need that help. And if they need, those... And it's why we're seeing sort of people striking, because they just don't know where to turn to get more money to pay for everything that's going up in price.
Yeah. OK, thank you, Helen, for coming in. I don't think there's much meat on the bones of that story, is there really, about not paying tax over 50? Sounds good. We've sorted it out for them. Now, coming up, Sturgeon's gender recognition bill comes under fire in a new report. Should the UK government take her to court? We're going to be speaking to former member of Scottish Parliament, Austin Sheridan, and then later I'm going to be also talking to a former Chief Superintendent, Parm Sandhu, on why the government have binned the legislation to tackle spiking. Stick around to find out why. See you after the break.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online. Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions. I have no time for cultural totalitarianism. We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Very good evening. This is Bev Turner sitting in for Mark Steyn tonight. Now, the Scottish Gender Recognition Act passed just a few weeks ago, and it certainly had its critics. The bill allows for individuals as young as 16 to receive what's known as a gender recognition certificate, which affirms their gender identity. This may not correlate, of course, with their biological sex. Perhaps even more controversially, those seeking the certificates will only need to live as the opposite gender for 3 months before legal recognition. What's more, the bill poses legal chaos. Government sources have told The Times that they plan to simply not recognise the Act. In other words, one side of the border, you're a man, and on the other side of the border, you're a woman. And I can't help but wonder what that means for the trans folk who might commute across the border for work. In England, I'm a woman. Now I'm in Scotland, I'm a man. Whilst in Wales, I'm a dragon, and in Northern Ireland, I'm a red deer, possibly. I don't know. We could actually be on course for a clash between Westminster and Hollywood at the Supreme Court, or even a constitutional crisis. If Sultan Sturgeon of Hollywood gets her way upon the issue of a gender recognition certificate, the Scottish Government will issue new birth certificates, and crucially, the rest of the UK has no choice but to recognise Scottish birth certificates. So the government's plan for what's being called the Legoland driving licence simply isn't going to work. This leaves the government with little choice but to invoke Section 35 of the Scotland Act, which grants the power to intervene if a bill contains provisions which make modifications of the law as it applies to reserved matters. So the Policy Exchange, the think tank, have just written a report making the legal case for the UK government to pursue this route. So, a little bit complicated, but I think very interesting. I'm joined now by Austin Sheridan, former SNP councillor, who I suspect will be siding with Holyrood if such a standoff came about. Austin, good evening. Nice to see you.
Good evening. How are we tonight? All right? And
yeah,
yes,
very good, thank you.
Absolutely correct. Yeah, you're correct, of course. I side with Scotland's Parliament. I mean, the gender recognition reform, the reform to the Act was passed by members of the Scottish Parliament from every single political party represented in the Parliament. That would be SNP, Conservative, Labour, Lib Dem and Green MSPs. People from all parties backed that. It's something that was going through a Parliament for 6 years, 2 extensive consultations. And now what we see is Westminster again threatening Scotland's democracy. I mean, this seems to be a running theme that Westminster simply just don't respect the wishes of the Scottish people and the politicians that they return. My understanding as well is that Mark Steyn, the Welsh First Minister, has said that he would like to introduce similar legislation to what's been pursued in Scotland as well.
But you say it's not respecting democracy and the democracy of the Scottish people. Do you know for a fact that the majority of the Scottish people wanted this Gender Recognition Act change? It was clear that the Parliament voted it in, but is this what the Scottish people voted for?
Well, every single political party, apart from the Conservatives, every single party in the Scottish Parliament that is represented via any forum was in their manifesto, and the people of Scotland elected those parties. And then those parties' MSPs voted based on their manifesto commitment. So if it's in political parties' manifesto that they're going to do something, then when they're elected, obviously the Scottish public would expect them to pursue the policies that are in their manifesto. So yes, the people of Scotland did vote for it, and it has been passed in the Scottish Parliament with an overwhelming majority of MSPs. As I said, from all parties, even Tory rebel MSPs were voting in favour of the Gender Recognition Bill. So, as I say, and it seems that Wales are going to do the same. So, in actual fact, it's Westminster that's out of step with the rest of the United Kingdom.
Austin, I did watch the Scottish Parliament. I watched the debates and it got quite feisty. Why are you so in favour of this change? Just help us to understand, because that bit for me was slightly missing from a lot of the conversations. It was just kind of assumed, this is just right. It's just right. There wasn't enough why, given that a young person can make such a life-changing decision without medical advice, without a diagnosis of gender dysphoria. Just help us understand why you need this.
Yeah, I mean, I believe that a big part of the debate was a lot of issues were being debated that actually weren't part of it, and I think that there was a lot of misunderstandings about what this legislation actually does. So, for example, anyone can live the gender that they so choose to live at any age. There is no restriction on that at all. People can change their names and documents with banks and passports right now without any change in the legislation. What this done was it allows people to change the sex on their birth certificate, so that if, very sadly, someone passes away, it means that they're not going to be misgendered at their funeral or on their death certificate. So in reality, I don't see why we would want to oppose that, but a lot of people that were campaigning against the bill were talking a lot about access to female spaces and saying that predators were going to use this legislation to make it easier. All of those things are covered right now with the legislation in the Equality Act of 2010. So this legislation doesn't change any of that.
OK. I mean, critics have argued that it will fundamentally alter who can access women-only services, leave them vulnerable to be abused by, predatory male offenders. So do you accept that? You don't accept that as a potential risk?
That's already a risk, right? And right now, and as that's how the law will be, is that when it comes to single-sex spaces, organisations will make those determinations on a case-by-case basis. And that is the right thing to do. I mean, one of the things that we should recognise is, one, it is against the law to present yourself as a gender that you are not. And you would be further breaking the law if you were to try and use gender recognition a certificate in order to pursue crimes. These are things that could have already been done by people, but it's just not the reality on the ground. And for me, this legislation was about being kind and actually taking away a lot of the stigma and a lot of the kind of, a lot of the cold process that people have to go through when they're just looking to make a simple change on their birth certificate.
Do you wonder, Austin, why there are so many more people now that want to change their gender than ever before? We've got thousands of people on the waiting list to have gender reassignment surgery. Do you have a theory as to why that is?
I don't think there's any more people today than what there was in the past. I believe now we thankfully have a social environment where people are able to be open and honest about who they are. The exact same thing could have been said about gay people. There's more gay people now than what there were in the past. Well, not really. There's always been the same amount of gay people, probably around 3-4% of the population. It's just that now thankfully, we live in a society where we can be free and live life, without the same bigotry that we used to have in days gone by. And I think in this debate, we have to make sure that we don't follow down the same bigotry that gay people have faced in the past, because transsexual people right now in this debate have been demonised, and it's been very unfair comparing them to predators. I mean, that is just not the case at all, and I find it deeply offensive.
Yeah, I don't subscribe to that at all. I try to make to put some really kind of a gap between those two debates. I don't presume that all trans people have got any sort of perverse intention. I think the majority of trans people are very vulnerable. I think they've lived often quite difficult lives, and I do worry though that as a pathological psychological condition, that gender dysphoria is something that needs to be medically recognised and investigated rather than ignored, and therefore normalising transgender, particularly surgery. And my worry is that we are, in an effort, as you say, to be kind, very well-intentioned, we might be making mistakes here that people might one day regret.
Yeah, I will absolutely, just correct something there. Bev, when I was saying about what people have been saying about comparing trans people to predators, I'm just talking about the general debate. And some of the people who have been against the legislation have said some really, really awful things. Now, in terms of what it is that you've said there, I mean, when people are, are going to be applying for surgery, if that's the option that people choose to go down. I mean, it is a long process, and within that process, people do, have counselling and things like that as well. In order to make sure, that they understand the process that they're going down, that they do understand, the seriousness of these things. So, but again, although I totally understand what you said there, and it is a valid point, that's not something that would be governed by this legislation. That's a process that's already in place, and it takes far too long actually, for people to be seen in our NHS, and that's something I would recognise, and it's something that we need to improve upon. But you're right, people have to be properly supported. Absolutely, I don't think anyone would disagree with that.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Austin Sheridan there.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Coming up, do spiking laws need to be harsher, or does the law currently cover this crime sufficiently? Well, here to give her say is former Chief Superintendent of the Metropolitan Police, Parm Sandhu. And it's nearly that time of the show when you get to ask me whatever you like. They didn't tell me about this bit. I'll try and answer the best I can in my version of Stump the Steyn. They've called it Test the Turner. Send in your views, gbviews@gbnews.uk. That's all to come after the break.
Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight, as Prince Harry's memoir gets pulled apart by fact-checkers, do you consider Spare a work of fiction? Dan will get your views before one of the world's top Conservative commentators, Candace Owens, takes the Sussexes to task. Plus, is Sadiq Khan on a deranged attempt to reverse Brexit? And have the BBC proven they're anti-British by making a podcast with Shamima Begum? Join Dan, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Steyn. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Good evening. I nearly said good morning. I'm normally on at 10 o'clock on GB News, Monday to Thursday, so please join me now. I am here in place of the glorious, wonderful, marvellous Mark Steyn. Nearly forgot his name then. Sorry, Mark, if you're watching. Get well. We all miss you. Now, yesterday, the government ruled against the legislation to create a specific spiking offence. This is a big deal. I've got teenagers. They've committed a whole year to this, and then they didn't pass it. So the inquiry was launched after higher levels of drink and needle spiking were reported across the country in 2021. The government have acknowledged that the crime is hugely underreported, but also under-prosecuted. The Home Office state that there are several laws that someone can be prosecuted under for the crime, but law enforcement say that a specific law would help to effectively police spiking. All signs point to the fact that the legislation may have made a difference. So the question is, why has it been swept under the carpet and branded as unnecessary by the government? Well, joining me now is former Chief Superintendent for the Met Police, Parm Sandhu. Good evening, Parm. Good to see you. Now, tell us more about this legislation. What might it have done for women and men around the country?
Well, looking through the actual report and the recommendations and the reason for the inquiry itself, the inquiry was set up to find out if it would increase reporting, if there would be better data available, and also the third thing was to send a clear message to perpetrators. Now, all of those three things can be done with existing legislation. There are already laws that say you shouldn't go around injecting people with drugs or putting things into their drinks, because we all know it's illegal. We all know that you shouldn't do that. You don't need an additional law to tell you that that's wrong. And the actual objectives of the new legislation would have been those three things, to make sure that people knew it was wrong. You don't need to have a new law to do that. My fear is that if they had gone down that route of having a new law, it would have taken, it would have abstracted people. There would have been more writing. It would have taken years of consultation.
Right.
The law, people know it's wrong, and police officers and staff need to actually act on what's already there. But they need the evidence to actually enforce the law. So they need those rapid testing kits, they need the medical examinations, and they need the CCTV, because the inquiry also makes recommendations about better searching of people going into clubs, better CCTV, and better safety of the people who are attending venues, so that when a person goes to a door or security person and says, I think I've been spiked, or my friend has been spiked, they're given the treatment that they need, not just kicked out and assumed that they are drunk or they've had one drink too many. And that's one of the recommendations that's been made by this report.
That's very interesting, and I think it is really important. As I say, I've got teenage girls growing up, I've got a teenage son. I really do think this is important. So what would somebody be charged with now, Palm, if they do this, if they do this crime? What would they currently be guilty of, or found guilty of, possibly?
They can get sent away for 10 years, and there's one particular one, which is offences against the person, which is administration of a noxious substance, and that could be either to cause injury or with malicious intent. There's also offences under the Sexual Offences Act if it is done with the intent of sexually abusing that person. So there is legislation there which could result in a person going to prison for 10 years. But one of the points I wanted to make was that we already have legislation against rape, and we all know what rape is, but the charge rate for rape is just under 6%, and the conviction rate is just over 1.3%. So we've got clear legislation about that particular crime, and by having that clear legislation, it doesn't mean we improve conviction rates or we have more people sent to prison. This is about teaching people, making sure that they know that they will go to prison, making sure that CCTV evidence is available, and making sure that the medical side is covered. And when I read through the recommendations and the report itself, right across the country, if somebody comes to notice it, in an evening, somebody goes to a club or a pub and they are spiked, it's not even clear where they go to get the blood tests or the urine tests.
Yeah.
Some forces are sending them to A&E. Other forces are doing it themselves. There are some ambulance services that are doing this rapid drug testing, but there's no clear guidance right across the country to say, let's grab that evidence that we can then use that to prosecute these awful people. But that's not happening. So we're failing on that side. So how are we ever going to get a prosecution?
OK. Palm Sindhu, thank you so much for joining us, and we just got to, talk to our teenagers, haven't we, and make sure they're careful. Dan Wootton is here. Dan, are you there?
Viv Turner, I am. I
haven't given you a New Year hug yet.
You were working hard today,
as usual,
Viv.
Dan.
Both ends of the day. I was watching you at 10 a.m, which feels like forever ago now.
You and me both.
I thought what you were saying at the top of the show about Prince Harry was absolutely fascinating, because it's been something I've been thinking for the past week. He criticises folk like me so much, and he's become a tabloid journalist himself. But anyway, Bev, I'm very excited about that. We have Candace Owens on the show tonight. You are not going to want to miss what she has to say about Harry and Meghan.
Amazing. And I will be right round there to give you a massive New Year's kiss in just a minute, Dan Wootton. Don't go anywhere. Thank you for watching me. I will be back on GB News Monday morning at 10 a.m. Dan will be up next after the weather. Have a good weekend.
Good evening, I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office. Turning very windy out there at the moment. It'll be blustery on Friday as well, but the winds will steadily ease, and for many, it'll be a bit of a drier day tomorrow. Still tonight, though, we've got low pressure nearby, and the isobars really squeezing together. It's turned very windy now across Northern Ireland. That wind could cause some disruption, possibly a bit of damage, and certainly some issues with ferry crossings and other public transport could be affected too. The strong winds then transfer over the Irish Sea into North Wales and parts of northern England. So again, a very blustery night here with showers coming in for most areas too. But much of the east and south will be dry, and that strong wind will stop temperatures falling too far. We start tomorrow at 4 or 5 Celsius. It'll still feel cold in that wind tomorrow morning. Plenty of showers for Northern Ireland, Wales, northwest England and northern Scotland. But much of eastern England and much of the south will have a dry day, and even the showers in the southwest should tend to fade. In fact, most places becoming dry by the afternoon, but some showers still feeding into southwest Scotland. Some sunny spells, and the winds will ease through the day, but that wind will make it feel quite chilly with temperatures 7 to 10 Celsius. More rain to come then during Friday evening, initially spreading into Wales and Northern Ireland, but another mass of rain then comes swamping in as we go through the early hours, bringing a soggy start to Saturday for the vast majority. Maybe a bit drier in northern Scotland. The rain hitting the colder air across Scotland, so some snow on the mountains should start to ease from Northern Ireland on Saturday morning, and then the rain tending to pull away from most places by Saturday afternoon, so it will turn a bit drier, but it's staying blustery and there will be more showers to come. Double digits across the south for a time, but actually it'll probably turn colder as that rain pulls away, because that rain's got some mild air mixed in with it, and as that pulls away, look at the map turning blue. It is going to get colder through the weekend and into next week with the return of frost and ice.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind, and we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Steyn. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio